Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? I certainly hope that each of you are doing very well. And I'm doing very well myself. First, I would like to say thank you very much for tuning in to me. I really do appreciate it. And I would like to welcome all of you to another episode of TJ's Topics. And if you've been tuning in to me for any length of time, then I don't have to tell you who I am. But if you are a new viewer, then I am TJ. And I tell you, it is such a pleasure to be with you today. I consider it a joy, an honor, and a privilege to be able to come into your presence on any given occasion. And on this occasion, which is the beginning of March. Can you believe it's already March? Here we are now in the third month of the year. And when you divide the years by quarters, we are now approaching the latter part of the first quarter of the year. And I hope this first quarter has been good to you so far. Now, let me get into my topic for today, which is one that could be a bit controversial for some, especially those who are diehard Christians. I mean, those who are just bona fide believers and Bible thumpers and and they take everything that the scripture says literally, including all the verses that talk about giving and stuff like that. So that's what I'm talking about today. My topic is religion is a ripoff. Did you hear what I said? Religion is a ripoff. Now, some of you may already be aware of that. But for those of you who are not, then hopefully by the end of this little broadcast today, you'll understand. You see, the church has a way of manipulating people and getting them to give and give and give. In fact, many years ago, I heard a pastor say that you're supposed to give until it hurts. But where did that come from? The Bible doesn't say it. I believe that's just something he came up with. More than likely it was. So I just want to share with you briefly some of the most utilized Bible scriptures that pastors like to run to in order to get people to give more money. But I would also like to tell you that none of these verses that I'm about to share with you have anything to do with money. Instead, they're talking about something different altogether. But the only way you would know that is if you did your own research, which is what I'm encouraging all of you to do, because I did it for myself. And once I discovered the truth, and I was able to draw my own conclusions, and I was able to see that we've been had. We really have. So the first passage, and this is a very familiar passage to all of you. Everybody out here who has ever been to church in their lifetime has heard this at one time or another. The scripture is Malachi chapter 3, and the emphasis is on verses 8 through 11, which says, "Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, said the Lord of hosts. Now that's Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 11, which most pastors and most churches run to right when it's time to raise the offering, trying to, convince people that they are, in a sense, robbing God. That's what we've been told our whole lives, that God needs our money. But back in 2013, I started having questions about the concept of tithing. Now, mind you, I had already been tithing for coming up on 20 years. And I started tithing because I thought that God would bless me as a result of it. So I continued to tithe, believing that somewhere down the road, I was going to come into this huge windfall, whereby I would be able to get up and testify about what God has done. But in 2013, I started questioning that whole idea of giving 10% of my paycheck or whatever I had. And so that led me to do research. And I started, tapping into various resources, whatever I could get my hands on, because I wanted to know the truth for myself. And upon doing my own research, I came to the conclusion that Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 11, in fact, Malachi chapter 3 altogether has absolutely nothing to do with tithing in the sense of giving money, because the idea wasn't about giving money. It was about bringing food, food and drink. And it wasn't the people who were robbing God, but it was the priests who were robbing God, the Levitical priesthood from the tribe of Levi in Israel. They were the ones whom the prophet Malachi said were robbing God. And they were robbing him, according to the narrative, not from a financial perspective, but it was more of a, I want to say a philanthropy or whatever, that from that perspective, in other words, they didn't want to give to the community what they deserve. See, the community, and remember now, all of this is in Old Testament, and the people who lived in and around Israel were supposed to bring their goods, a tenth of their goods, their cattle and, the meat that they raised from whatever animals that they had, and the fruits and vegetables, the grains, the oil and the wine. They were supposed to bring a tenth of that to the storehouse, which wasn't a church. It wasn't a cathedral, but it was more along the lines of a goodwill center, like a big barn. That's what the storehouse was. And then when it talks about rebuking the devourer for your sakes, down in verse 11, it's talking about the different little insects in the field, and neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, said the Lord of hosts. Well, the fruit would be allowed to grow to maturity, and they wouldn't fall off the vine before time, and they weren't rot. The different insects and stuff weren't getting there and destroy them or anything. And now going back to verse 10, where it says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. That meat is food, not money, food. And prove me now, here what said the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven. Now, guess what? The windows of heaven were the clouds in the sky, and pour you out a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive. The blessing was rain. I'm talking about rain to come down and water the fields where the crops would grow, and the fruits and the vegetables and everything would sprout up, creating a bountiful harvest. That is what Malachi chapter 3 is talking about. But in order to know for sure what Malachi chapter 3 verses 8 through 11 is talking about, you can't start just reading in Malachi chapter 3. You got to go back and look at Malachi chapter 1 and read all the way through to chapter 3, and it will tell you exactly what it's all about. And read it with an open mind. That way you'll be able to grasp exactly what it's saying and do research on it at the same time. So that's one passage that they like to use to manipulate the people into giving. The second one is Luke chapter 6, verse 38, which says, give and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. Back in 2001, when I first started getting into that, I thought that it was talking about money, because according to a lot of pastors whom I, heard and sat under and stuff, I thought that that's what it was, giving offerings and things like that. However, 7 years later, in the spring of 2008, I was led to do some research on that. And the way I found out was I had to go back to the beginning of Luke chapter 6, starting at verse 1, and read all the way through to verse 38 and the preceding verses. And that is what led me to discover that Luke chapter 6, verse 38 had absolutely nothing to do with giving money. But the total philosophy of Luke chapter 6 is talking about how you treat your fellow man. It's talking about how we deal with one another, how we approach each other and be kind to one another. That's what Luke chapter 6 is talking about. But you won't know that unless you do your research. And I'm so thankful that I did. And I like this verse in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 17. Again, it's not talking about money, and it's not talking to anybody who lives in the United States of America, but it's talking to the people who were in Israel at that time. It says that every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee. That's Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 17. In other words, you don't have to be made to give a certain amount or give anything if you don't have it. Give whatever you're able to give. And if you don't want to give it all, don't, because nobody's making you do anything. Now, let me say this before I go. Religion is definitely a ripoff. Is a ripoff on a global scale, but it's especially a ripoff on a national scale right here in America. Because right here in America, religion, the churches and everything, took in an estimated $153.4 billion in 2023. Over $153 billion. That's a lot of money. And is that money benefiting the communities in which these churches are located, helping to build up people's homes and neighborhoods and things, feeding kids? And I know some of them, some churches are feeding people. We know that. there are some who are reaching out trying to help those who are less fortunate, and we commend them. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the ones who are buying the preacher new cars and buying the first lady hats and and fur coats, diamond rings, and sending the pastor on vacation, private jets, and all that kind of stuff. Like a lot of these mega preachers have. It's ridiculous. And so many people have fallen for these same old tricks week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, and millennium after millennium. I'm telling you, it is absolutely ridiculous. And it's crazy. Here we are in 2024, and people are still buying into all of this. But that's why I encourage all of you to do your research. And in doing so, you will find out that you've been had. Now, religion is definitely a business, and Jesus is the product. He's being sold. Now, other products that are available are Bibles, crosses, an assortment of books, CDs, DVDs, clergy garments, choir robes, etc. All sorts of things that you can purchase in order to prop up the institution of religion. And I would like to think that Christianity is the main culprit, since, this country here in the United States mostly identifies with the Christian religion. So there it is. And then there's the monetization of religion, which consists of donation requests, paying for weddings and funerals, and having all sorts of functions like banquets, fashion shows, car washes, selling dinner plates, fried chicken, and all that good stuff. And then there's the marketing of it, both positive and negative. Positive, which would consist of unconditional love and acceptance, a community of believers, a family type atmosphere, and the negative, which is God's rebuke and his punishment for sin, and being ostracized by the church. And they're running guilt trips on you, and fire and brimstone. So that's all I have time for today. And I want you to join me again next time when I'm going to talk about some more, okay? This is Taryn Jerome Harris, reminding you that every round goes higher and higher. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.